In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that Dairy Queen like to ask in their interviews, and I'm going to help you plan great answers that will get Dairy Queen interested in hiring you. So let's start with a question that comes up in every Dairy Queen interview, and they are really interested to know exactly what times you're able to work to see if your availability matches up with their needs. And if you don't answer this question very well, you are very unlikely to get the job. So I'm going to show you a great technique to plan an answer to this question that always scores highly. So you want to get these ideas in. You want to show that you have a can-do attitude. You want to show off as much flexibility as you possibly can. And you have to convince them that you're going to be there when you are needed. You're going to meet those business requirements. And when you show off all of those things, you're going to show that you are committed to the job. The way that people screw this question up really badly is they immediately start talking about all of the times that they can't work at Dairy Queen. And what Dairy Queen actually wants to hear is they want to hear people that can do times. They want people that are committed. If you start talking about all the things you can't do, you're just giving them one, a list of reasons not to hire you, and two, they are questioning whether you are really committed to the job and whether you take it seriously. The other trick that helps you score well in this question is to think about the key times that they need people and to specifically mention those times that they want. So Dairy Queen like to hear things like you can work at the holidays because naturally ice cream is more popular when people are on holiday, and for example tourism is higher at those times, and also in the summer sales of ice cream are somewhat higher. Though the restaurant business of course ticks over across the whole year at a fairly steady pace, but particularly the ice cream business does really pick up in the holidays, so they need slightly more staffing at that time. Weekends are a great time because people would rather work Monday to Friday. So if you're volunteering to say, I'm happy to work on weekends, that's a great thing for them to hear. Evenings, again, same reason. If you're happy to work in the evenings, that's a great thing to mention. To show off some flexibility, two good things to mention is that you're happy to work at short notice when staffing changes. And you can also say that you're very flexible about your working times and that you're happy for your work pattern to meet business needs. And when you use that phrase, meet business needs, that's really quite reassuring to the manager that you're going to be there at the times that he or she needs you to be there. So let's move on and look at the next question, which is what can you tell me about Dairy Queen? And when companies are hiring people, they would much rather hire someone that is actually prepared for their interview than hire someone who simply hasn't done preparation. And if you look on the right, there's a nice diagram that shows you basically how they think about marking. So when they're deciding how you score on this question, they don't want someone who just knows the obvious. Of course, if you don't know the obvious things, then you're going to be scored very low. They're going to rate you very negative if you don't know the obvious. You don't know that Dairy Queen, for example, sells ice cream. That's not going to impress them at all if you didn't know that. You want to show that you've done some research, and then to really impress them, show off that you've done some research that the average person would not know, that only someone who has actually done some good research would know. So you ought to make sure that you talk about them serving soft serve ice cream rather than just ice cream, because that's one step higher. Talk about the fact that it's a franchise business and that it's not just one company owning all of the stores. So you may be applying to a company that is owned by an individual, or the store that you're applying to could be owned by a company that owns several Dairy Queens, or you could be applying to a corporate owned store. So you need to work out exactly what type of store you're applying to, and that helps you inform how you answer some of the questions in the interview. If you're applying to a one store network, you'll be probably being interviewed by the owner. Whereas in a multi-store network, it's going to be a very different dynamic, and a corporate one is going to be very much more corporate. You can also talk about some aspects of the history. So that it was founded in 1940, and Sherb Noble was the original founder. You should know that Berkshire Hathaway is the ultimate company that owns the Dairy Queen brand. And you can talk about some basic ideas about the company, that it's also fast food beyond ice cream, and that Dairy Queens, historically particularly, and still to this day, are a very social brand. They're about people coming there to socialize and spend time with friends and family. And if you get all those ideas in, you're going to show that you've done your research and satisfy them that you've prepared for your interview. And my top tip is to look up the About DQ or Dairy Queen page on their website, because that's got a lot of the key points from their history and some facts that are worth remembering. So let's look at question 3. How would you manage an angry complaint from a customer? And you can often encounter rude and angry and sometimes abusive employees in any job, but in customer service, that's somewhat more common. And so some key ideas that I would definitely recommend you get in. So you want to reassure them that you're going to be professional and calm at absolutely all times. You also want to state very clearly that you will know Dairy Queen's policies, that you're going to be very aware what the policies are and you're going to follow the policies. You must use the word de-escalate. That means calming the situation down. You're going to be speaking calmly. You're going to be listening attentively. And you're basically focusing on getting the situation under control and maintaining a positive experience for that angry customer and for every other customer in the store. And the last thing you mention in response to any question about a complaint is that you are solutions focused. You are focused on finding a solution to the problem. You're taking that angry, upset customer and turning them into a satisfied customer who has had their problem successfully resolved. So get those 4 ideas into your answer when you're asked about complaints or you're asked about difficult customers or angry customers, and you will satisfy them that you're going to do the right thing and you know what you're talking about. So let's look at question 4, which is about your major strengths and weaknesses. And you should notice if they ask about greatest strength or weakness or major strength or weakness, that they don't want something trivial, that they want something of some substance. So you start by thinking of a key strength. So think about something that you have that's really good. If you've got experience working in retail or customer service, you're good at working with customers, you're friendly, you've got good customer service skills, that's a really great one. That's probably the number one thing that they're looking for. You want to show some evidence. Great evidence can be a qualification, can be job experience that you have on your CV, or ideally, the most powerful piece of evidence is if you can point to a reference from a previous manager or someone who is highly credible that can back you up on that. And most importantly, for a strength, it has to actually be important to Dairy Queen's business. It's no good having a strength that is irrelevant, like being an amazing chess player. That's not going to help. It has to be something that is used almost every day or every single day at Dairy Queen. And the way to structure your answer is very simple. Say that a key strength I possess is, tell them what your strength is. This is evidenced by, supply a reference, a qualification, or reference something in your CV that shows that you've got the relevant experience. And then finally, really sell yourself on the last point, where you explain to them exactly how you are going to use this strength to improve their business. And if you get those ideas in, you will satisfy them that you've got a good strength and you will sell yourself on that strength. The dangerous question now is when they ask about your weakness, and you absolutely must be careful with this question. So you first start with an actual weakness. They're not interested in fake weaknesses. It's basically dodging the question. So I'm a complete perfectionist is not a real weakness. It's sort of a weakness, but it isn't really much of a compelling weakness. The second thing you must reassure them of is that you're sorting it out. So if you say a weakness, you're exposing yourself somewhat. You're exposing a negative thing in an interview, which is not a great thing to do. But by reassuring them that you're doing something to fix it, you can play down that weakness. And the last thing that you absolutely must make sure of is that your weakness has to be something that they don't care about, that is totally irrelevant to your job. So if you were to say something like, I struggle with body odor, that's the interview pretty much over, because that's going to be a big problem, and that is not an acceptable weakness to have in a customer-facing role. The way that you structure your answer is to say, a weakness I'm currently working on is, tell them very briefly what your weakness is, but then the key point is you talk at length about, to overcome this weakness, I am going to, and then just explain all the things that you're doing to overcome it. It's sometimes difficult to think of a weakness, so some ones that I would suggest is perhaps spelling if you're not in a role that requires a lot of writing. Delegation is a good one to have as a weakness, and speaking only one language is another one to have as a weakness, because the vast majority of people applying are going to have that as one language, unless you're applying to an area where there's a very high number or a high proportion of non-English speakers. That's the only exception to that one. So get those 3 ideas in. use the structure that I've given you and pick a good weakness that they don't care about, and you'll be successful in that question. You're looking to survive this question rather than impress them with it, because it's a weakness. It's never going to be impressive. So the last question is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And the first thing you must not do is say leaving Dairy Queen, quitting the job, doing something better, going to a college or university, getting a better job, doing a different career. That is absolutely the wrong way to answer it, and it could lose you the interview completely. So the first thing you want to think about is what progression can be reasonably expected, and you ought to be conscious of the person that's interviewing you. You don't want to be saying that you're going to be 3 levels above the person that's interviewing you, because that's not going to go down very well. So think about, in 5 years' time, if you're applying as a crew member, could you be a deputy manager? Could you be en route to being a store manager? That's a good thing to talk about. A great thing to mention might be a very long-term goal about being a franchisee as an ultimate 10-year, 20-year goal, which you could put on to the end of your answer here, because if you're applying to a corporate store, that might really interest them, as the fact that they could be employing a future franchisee. Then you need to make sure you talk about how you're going to develop. What skills are you going to get from working at Dairy Queen? Are you going to look to slowly progress into taking on more responsibility, get feedback, get training on how to do more and more of your role? You're going to develop excellent customer service skills, and you're going to use all of the mentoring and professional development that's available at that organization. You have to be very clear about talking about how Dairy Queen fit in to your long-term plan. Your 5-year plan has to mention Dairy Queen several times. So at Dairy Queen, I will do this. Then next year, I'm hoping to do this. And a good thing to mention that pretty much anybody can mention is that in a few years' time, you would hope to be trusted enough that when a new employee joins, that you would be involved in mentoring and helping train up that employee. And the last thing is, how will you demonstrate success? How are you going to show that you've earned this progression that you've talked about? Don't talk about progression as something that is expected. Talk about, how you're going to earn it. So I'm looking to be amazing in my current role for some time. And once I've demonstrated a strong track record in that role, looking to advance. And only once you've shown that do you even consider advancement. So as a bonus, I'd like to share with you some great questions that you can ask at the end of your interview. So ask them about the next step. Show that you're keen and you actually care what's going to happen next. Ask them to tell you more about the team that you're working with, and show a real interest in getting to know who you're working with. And that's a really important thing for you. Ask them what you can do to prepare. They want people that are going to start there really well prepared. So, for example, they might tell you to learn the menu, and you commit there and then to doing exactly what they say you need to do to plan if you're successful. The last one that is a clever question to ask is ask them what they look for in an ideal employee. What is perfection to them? And then you can use that as an opportunity to engage in a positive discussion with the hiring manager, where you're explaining and discussing your previous answers and how they show some of the aspects of an ideal employee. And lastly, you have to make up one question on the day. You can't pre-plan it. One question has to come up from something in the interview. So when you're being interviewed, just think of a question as it comes up and just remember that, and at the end ask it. So hopefully this video has been very helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck in your Dairy Queen interview.